The storm had finally died, leaving the beach in a hush of wet sand and scattered driftwood. Moonlight silvered the waves as they rolled gently onto the shore, their foam hissing like whispers. I stood alone at the edge of the cove, boots sinking into the cold, damp grit, the taste of salt thick on my lips. The old lighthouse behind me blinked its lazy rhythm, but its beam barely reached the water tonight. Everyone else had gone home hours ago, fishermen, tourists, even the Coast Guard patrols. Convinced the freak squall had passed without incident. No one expected anything more. Then she emerged. One moment the sea was empty, black and restless under the moon. The next, she rose from the surf like a secret the ocean had decided to surrender. Water streamed from her long, dark hair in shimmering sheets, cascading over shoulders that glowed faintly with an inner luminescence, as if bioluminescence clung to her skin. She was naked except for what looked like living kelp and pearl strands that clung to her body in delicate, strategic drapes, moving with her as though they had a will of their own. Her eyes, large, luminous, the color of deep ocean trenches, locked onto me instantly across the 30 yards of beach. No fear. No hesitation. Only a quiet, piercing awareness that made my heart slam against my ribs. I froze, breath caught in my throat. The emotional punch hit first. Awe so sharp it bordered on reverence, mixed with a jolt of pure, instinctive protectiveness. She looked impossibly fragile standing there in the shallows, waves licking at her ankles, yet there was a regal strength in the way she carried herself, spine straight, chin lifted despite the violent trembling that had begun in her limbs from the cold. How had she gotten here? No boat. No parachute. No sign of any vessel on the horizon. The coast had been monitored all evening during the storm. Radar, cameras, the works. She had simply appeared. Emerged from the sea as if the water itself had birthed her. I took one hesitant step forward, then another, my flashlight beam trembling in my hand. "Hey, are you okay?" My voice sounded too loud, too human against the gentle roar of the tide. "Miss? Do you need help?" She didn't answer at first. Instead, she walked slowly toward me, each step deliberate, leaving faint, glowing footprints in the wet sand that faded within seconds. The closer she came, the more details I noticed that made my pulse race with a mix of wonder and growing unease, the subtle webbing between her fingers, the faint gill-like lines along the sides of her neck that fluttered faintly with each breath, the way her skin seemed to drink in the moonlight and reflect it back softer, bluer. She stopped just beyond arm's reach, head tilted slightly, studying me with those impossible eyes. Tears, or were they seawater? Tracked down her cheeks, mixing with the salt already there. I do not know," she said at last. Her voice was melodic, layered, like wind through hollow shells and distant whale song woven together. It carried an accent that belonged to no language I had ever heard, yet I understood every word. The currents brought me. The deep called my name and then, silence. No one knows how I arrived. Not even I. The confession hung between us, raw and vulnerable, and the emotional intensity of it nearly knocked me back. She was lost, profoundly, existentially lost, in a way that went beyond shipwreck or accident. There was no panic in her tone, only a quiet, heartbreaking acceptance that made my chest tighten with empathy. I wanted to wrap my jacket around her immediately, to shield her from the night wind that was already raising goosebumps on her iridescent skin. But something held me still. The suspense of the unknown. Who was she? What was she? If I touched her, would she vanish back into the waves like a dream? "My name is Elias," I offered softly, lowering the flashlight so it wouldn't blind her. "I live in the lighthouse. Come on, you're freezing. Let me get you inside, get you warm. We can figure this out." She hesitated, glancing back at the sea as if it might call her home at any second. The waves seemed to pause, listening. Then her gaze returned to me, and in that moment I saw the depth of her fear, not of me, but of the vast, empty world she had been thrust into. Elias, she repeated, tasting the name like a new current. A small, fragile smile touched her lips, but it didn't reach her eyes. I am called Lyra. Or. I was. Before the forgetting. Before the deep took my memories and left only this. She gestured vaguely at herself, at the beach, at the endless night. I had no choice but to surface. Something pushed me. A warning. A summons. I do not know which. The wind picked up again, carrying the distant rumble of thunder from the retreating storm. Suspense thickened the air like fog rolling in. I could feel it in my bones, the sense that this meeting was no accident, that her arrival carried weight far heavier than one lost woman washing ashore. My mind raced with possibilities. Experimental government project gone wrong, some undiscovered deep-sea species, even something more impossible, myth, legend, a being from another realm entirely. But none of that mattered as much as the trembling in her limbs or the quiet desperation in her voice. I shrugged off my heavy wool jacket and stepped closer, holding it out like an offering. Here. Please. You'll catch your death out here. Lyra looked at the jacket for a long moment, as if the concept of clothing was both foreign and strangely intimate. Then she accepted it, sliding her arms into the sleeves with graceful movements that made the kelp strands shift and shimmer. The jacket swallowed her smaller frame, but the simple act of covering herself seemed to ground her. She pulled it tight around her body, inhaling deeply, perhaps catching my scent, and for the first time, some of the tension eased from her shoulders. Thank you, she whispered. The words carried such profound gratitude that my throat tightened. No one had ever said thank you with quite that much weight, as if I had handed her not just warmth but a lifeline to humanity itself. You do not run. You do not call others. Most would fear what they cannot explain. But you see me. Emotion surged through me, hot and unexpected. I had spent years in this lonely cove, tending the light, watching the sea claim its secrets. Solitude had become my quiet companion. Now this impossible woman stood before me, her presence cracking open something I hadn't realized was sealed shut. I'm not afraid of the sea, I said, though my voice wavered. I've lived beside it my whole life. But you're something it decided to give back. And I won't turn away from that. We began walking slowly toward the lighthouse, my arm hovering near her back in case she stumbled. Every few steps she glanced back at the water, as if expecting it to reach out and reclaim her. The glowing footprints had vanished completely now, leaving no trace that she had ever emerged from the surf. No one else knew. The thought sent a shiver through me, not just suspense, but a fierce, protective instinct. If word got out, scientists, military, media, they would descend like sharks. She would be studied, contained, perhaps never allowed to see the ocean again. The idea made my stomach twist with a visceral dread. Inside the lighthouse keeper's cottage, the fire I had lit earlier still crackled warmly. I guided her to the old armchair by the hearth, wrapping a thick blanket around her shoulders on top of the jacket. She sank into it with a soft sigh, drawing her knees up like a child seeking comfort. The firelight danced across her face, highlighting the delicate patterns that swirled just beneath her skin. Faint, ethereal markings that looked like living tide charts. Tell me what you remember, I said gently, kneeling to add another log to the fire. Anything at all. Lyra stared into the flames for a long time, her luminous eyes reflecting orange and gold. When she spoke, her voice was barely above the crackle of wood. I remember the pressure. The deep dark where light fears to go. Songs older than your stars. Then, pain. A tearing. Something breaking the veil between worlds. I was pulled upward, faster than any current, until the surface shattered around me and I was here. No ship. No storm that carried me. Just the sea opening its mouth and spitting me onto your sand. A single tear slipped down her cheek, catching the firelight like liquid pearl. I do not know my purpose. I do not know why me. But I feel it, Elias. Something hunts in the depths. Something that followed me through. And if it surfaces. She trailed off, but the implication hung heavy in the warm room. Suspense coiled tighter in my gut. The gentle waves outside now sounded menacing, each crash against the rocks a potential footstep of whatever had driven her here. I reached out instinctively, taking her hand in mine. Her skin was cool but warming quickly, and the contact sent a spark through both of us. She didn't pull away. Instead, her fingers curled around mine with surprising strength, as if anchoring herself to this new reality. I won't let anything hurt you, I promised, the words coming from a place deeper than reason. Not tonight. Not while I'm here.